What up, guys? Welcome to another episode. I almost said episode of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Welcome to another edition to Masterpiece Theater. Another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Today we have one of the black belts at our gym, one of my students, Jeff. He's going to be helping me run. Well, let me rephrase that. He's really the mastermind as far as the day-to-day, sort of the actual running of the tournament. He is the guy. If you guys come to one of the Chewjitsu Opens that we're going to be running, him and his wife are the ones that are going to be running the show, making sure that it's running smoothly, making sure that the matches happen on time. You know, they're the ones running that, and Jeff is he's the one making that happen. And so I wanted to introduce him to you guys on the podcast. We'll obviously talk about who he is, his grappling experience, stuff like that, because he has some cool stories to share with you that could be useful to you. But then also tell you about the Chewjitsu Open competition that we have coming up. And again, if you guys want to get more information on that, just check the links in my bio online, or you can go to theirs. That we have an Instagram for it now, Chewjitsu Open competition, and you can find us pretty easily. We've got, I think, about 8 tournaments coming up this year that you guys can get in. Maybe was it 6 or 8 tournaments, Jeff?
We've got 7, and we're still trying to schedule the final one.
Okay, that's the one. So it's about 7 tournaments right now. May have 8 if you guys want to check it out. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for being here. As always, thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys have never tried CBD, or if you've tried CBD from another company and you weren't really satisfied with the results, again, I'm a big proponent of Charlotte's Web. Eugene and I went down to one of their farms in Colorado back in 2021 because we were promoting their product and we wanted to actually meet the people behind the brand and see what they were up to. And it was super interesting. We got to see the farm. We got to see who the people were that were making this stuff and hear them kind of geek out about the product, and also hear about how important it was for them to make a good product, a product that's actually ensures purity in what's into it. For example, the product is third-party tested. So if you, for instance, get something from a store, from some smoke shop or whatever that says it's got CBD in it, you don't really know because it's not FDA regulated. So it could have all sorts of different stuff in it that you aren't expecting. You could have dosages that aren't labeled or mislabeled on the product. And so again, it's not only a good product that's made by people that geek out about this stuff, and they're one of the first CBD companies I heard of back in the day when this whole thing got started, but also too, they're ensuring the quality of their product. And so if you guys want to check them out, go to their website at charlottesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order. You can use that towards their gummies, their tinctures, which is like the little eyedropper thing, or even some of their balms that you can rub on sore muscles that are a little bit more effective than, say, just like an icy hot or something like that. And also, guys, check out my buddy's website, Matt, at epicrollbjj.com. Matt is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, jiu-jitsu black belt who rolls and trains and gets beat up and injured just like the rest of us. And he also has a knack for making cool-looking jiu-jitsu gear. If you've never been to his website, you can go to epicrollbjj.com. He makes everything from T-shirts, rash guards, shorts, gis, the whole thing, anything you need jiu-jitsu related. He makes it. Cool designs, good products, good quality products, and great customer service. If you guys want to check him out and just kind of go through his website and browse around to see what you like, you can do so. And if you find something you like, if you'd like to save 20%, use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Again, that's CHEWJITSU 20 for 20% off the order. And guys, if you'd like to support the podcast directly and get access to an exclusive library of content that includes everything from warm-up and stretching routines that my co-host Eugene has created specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners, to folding seminars and rolling videos, narrated rolls, and also specific tips giving to you from jiu-jitsu black belts and doctors and everyone else that we've had on this podcast for the last 4 or 5 years. If you guys would like to get that library of content access and get to access that library of content for a very inexpensive price, you can do so by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. When you join up, you'll also get an ad-free version of this podcast in case you don't like listening to these ad reads. And then you can get access to the library and you can dig into it. Also, guys, if you'd like to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get access to 2 free ebooks. One will help you to develop a jiu-jitsu game plan, basically gives you a template that essentially was my template from 2015 to maybe around 2019. That was pretty much my game plan for jiu-jitsu. And you can take that framework and then create your own as a useful exercise if you have a competition coming up. And then also have another one, which is more on drilling strategies and training strategies to break through jiu-jitsu plateaus. If you're getting like a sticky point in your game and you're just getting stuck, you don't feel like you're making any progress, it can be a way to get around that. And again, you get access to that, and then you will get my daily email at chewjitsu.net/join. All right, with that out of the way, guys, let's jump into this podcast. So we've got, you'll notice if you're watching this on YouTube that I am not in studio. I've been running around doing a ton of seminars this last year. And so I feel like I've been on a plane every single week. Actually been on a plane almost every single weekend with one exception. The weekend we had the baby shower, I've been on a plane every single weekend for the last like month and some change. So I'm not in studio, but my replacement Jeff is going to be there. If you guys are watching the video of this, it's going to be the Jiu-Jitsu podcast starring Eugene and Jeff, and Chewy will no longer be there. Hey, there we go. It's really weird
to our show.
It's weird for me to be here and to look and like someone's in my seat.
Yeah, it's straight. I'm like, all right. Well, usually Chewy's there and somebody's on the screen, but today you are kind of the guest. So, but not really. Jeff's here, and we're happy to have him. It's been we've been talking about this for a while, and Jeff's one of the guys that we started this. Well, you kind of started the 6 a.m. classes, and then you were blast doubling me at like 6:30 in the morning, and it was difficult to get used to. But
bro,
we've done a great job with those. Yeah,
I remember I came in for one of those 6 a.m. Classes like during 2020 when we were 2020 when we were kind of keeping things a little bit more segregated with the class times to try to help out in some way or whatever. And I remember coming in for one of those 6 a.m. classes. I'm still kind of foggy or whatever, and then rolling, and like people were like coming after me. I'm like, oh, whoa. Like I was expecting more of a slower, 6 a.m. roll. Nope. And I made that same mistake. I originally started a 6 a.m. class back in like 2016 for a few months. And I remember the first time we did the 6 a.m. class, we had like 16 people in the mat. It was a huge class for that early in the morning. And I remember rolling with Ben Fowler, and Ben Fowler just gotten off of work. He was working at UPS at the time. And so he was still like wide awake and full of piss and vinegar. And I remember rolling with him, and I wasn't ready for that at 6 a.m. So not quite there.
The crew's kind of used to it. Like I think, and now like the classes seem to have been like ramping up. Yeah. Like I had like easily 10. We had Mark, black belt. We had a brown belt, me, black belt. We had we had some good scraps, and we did some king of the mat today at 6 a.m. So that was fun. That was a good time. So yeah. What about you? How's 6 a.m.? Do you like that's pretty much your only training now is 6 a.m. Yeah.
And I started those back in 2019 because I had 2 kids. I had a kid in 2017 and another in 2019.
Yep.
I'm trying to balance family life and jiu-jitsu life, and don't want to give up either, of course, right? But my family comes first. So started those 6 a.m. to do it before the workday. Love it.
Yeah, it's been, you got to, it's like some people don't get up. Like, they're like, I'll go to later class. It's like, we don't have any options. Like, we have to do it. Like, we both have kids. And Chewy, now yourself, you may find yourself coming to the 6 a.m. classes too.
It's a challenge, bro. I was talking to someone today, and I was like, man, like we always in jiu-jitsu, we always give props to the hardcore athlete competitors, and we're like, man, they're so disciplined, they train so much, da 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 da. I'm like, yeah, and I don't know, man, because I remember being an athlete to the point during my days where I was really young, and all I did was basically train, eat, sleep, train again, do it all over again and again. That was just fun. Like being like just I have such a minuscule amount of experience in comparison to you guys. And just even in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, I'm like, whoa, this is challenging. You just can't get up and just go. You've got this little creature that you have to take care of now, and it can't take care of itself. And so that thing, and it comes first, right? You have to take care of the child first before you can go run off and do something. And I'm like, man, probably the most disciplined people in jiu-jitsu are probably all the parents that are holding down regular training schedules, work schedules, doing all these different things that they're having to do, and and then squeezing in their training. Props to any of you guys that are parents listening to this. Props to you guys, because that is not easy. And again, it's a lot of times it's very easy for people who maybe haven't done it, like people who aren't parents, to kind of pass it off. It's not that big of a deal. It's a big deal, and it's very challenging to do all these things, and then also on top of that squeeze an hour to 2 hours of you time in whatever part of the day you can manage.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is like having a supportive significant other is really important. Like my wife's, dabbling in training a little bit, but having somebody that kind of can support this thing, because I think we're all better for it. Like when we train afterwards, we're a little bit more calm and more patient after we get all the energy. I don't know about you. I know you're like, man, I mean, I'm sure you've got tons of energy, and I think getting that energy out, I think is probably makes you a little bit more patient at home. It does for me.
My wife always jokes. I used to, if she'd be in the kitchen doing the dishes or making dinner or something, and I'd walk up to her and I'd put her in a tie clench and start throwing knees, and she's like, "You need to go to the gym. You need to go train. Take out that aggression."
She'll mess you up, dude. Your wife doesn't mess around.
And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because like, think about it this way, like, like when you watch like an infant, when you're watching them, when they get upset or they're like irritable, right? How does it show? It shows up in their, like the way they move their body around. They start flailing around, they'll cry, they stomp their feet. They're just doing stuff. And so like, as we get older, we learn that we're not supposed to do those things. So we don't do those things. We don't sit around. Maybe some people do, obviously, because you got phones and people can watch those kinds of videos. But for the most part, most of us that are well-adjusted, we don't sit there and start throwing temper tantrums in the middle of the day. But that energy, that negative energy, is still getting trapped in our bodies. Yeah. And we have to do something with it. We have to expel it. And I think that for a lot of people, that's what jiu-jitsu does. It's like when you're going to work and you're getting treated like crap from your boss, or, you're just dealing with a lot of stressful stuff in your life. You can't just fold in the middle of the day and start crying about it. And, like an infant, you have to deal with it. And I think for a lot of people, jiu-jitsu sort of takes, if you think of like a cup, it's like we've got all this stress built up, and basically training just sort of dumps it out a little bit. So this way you can take on more later on in the day and not like blow a head gasket. Whereas, for a lot of us, like say during 2020, when things closed down for at least a little bit for us, you're starting to go through that, and everybody's getting more irritable. We're getting a little shorter with our spouses and everything else. And then you go and train, and you remind yourself, oh yeah, that's what this is. That's what this really does for me. Helps kind of keep me grounded and centered.
Yeah, I think like I can just remember like my anxiety levels around COVID and stuff were pretty elevated, just because like you don't have any kind of resolution. You didn't really see like a light at the end of the tunnel, and then you don't have a way to like connect with people that you usually see, that you train with all the time, that you're around all the time, that you kind of like, everybody was so isolated. We were fortunate we got to still podcast and do that, which was awesome. But like, it was a weird time, and like not being able, I don't think I trained for 4 months. I think I was like, that's the longest I besides having a pretty serious injury, that was the longest I had not trained. And so, it was good. And then like, that's how the 6 a.m. classes kind of came along. I kind of just like was talking to you one day, and you're like, hey, we're doing 6 a.m. So like
we never stopped.
Yeah. And you guys were going, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm in. And so it's become like just a point of necessity. I think just going and training, I think you just have to do. I think having kids makes the desire, the need to train even more.
Yeah, you gotta be creative to find that time, and that's where the 6 a.m. comes from. And for you, Chewy, having a little one, you're gonna have to be more creative, right? Because the little one doesn't really care about your schedule sometimes, and you're gonna have to be able to work around that. And the 6 a.m. is what really worked for me.
Yeah.
Well, and you really got to like you have to be so much tighter with everything you're doing, because you have less time to like play around and wiggle. So like, even, doing like some of the internet marketing work and stuff, and some of the writing emails and everything else I was doing, like the other day, it was like, okay, like he just went down for a nap. Jess can watch him, but I want to be around. And also too, I don't want to just pass it off onto her to deal with it all the time. Right. So I'm looking like, all right, I've got to get this done. So like, I did more work in about 2.5 hours than I usually would do in like multiple writing sessions, because I had to, right? Like there was just no choice. You have to get it done. And so, and then yesterday I went and lifted weights. It was just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, I got this much time. I've got to lift weights. I've got to film some videos. I had to do a meeting with you and the guy for 3-step. It was just like boom, 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 boom. Like I don't have a choice. It has to get done now, and there is no other time. So, it makes you tighter. But sort of to introduce people to you, Jeff, just kind of take them through. We'll talk a little bit about you before we talk about the tournament, because you've got some interesting stories and some interesting perspectives, I think, that could be useful for people, because, you're not a guy that just eats. You do love jiu-jitsu and all this stuff, but like, you don't just like sleep all day and train all day. That's not what you do. You're, a black belt, and you're good. You're still very skilled, but you're like what a lot of people are doing, where they're training as much as they possibly can, but you're holding down a very challenging job. You've also got like a side gig right now with the tournament, and you've got a family and you're trying to take care of them too. So I think there's some interesting stuff for people there, but tell them about like you, where did you get started with jiu-jitsu training?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I think I was 18, 19 years old, back in 2004 or so. And a buddy of mine in the military, he was like, hey, there's a fight coming up this week and you want to go watch this fight? And I'm like, what do you mean a fight? He's like, like the UFC fights, but it's like a local fight. And sure, I'll go to it. So I went to this local fight. It was really, really low budget, backwoods, a bunch of guys, like no weight classes, just whoever wants to. Actually, I think you had to actually pay to sign up. And then after you paid to enter, then you could fight.
Oh, wow.
So it was really unskilled, and a bunch of guys were fighting. I was like, man, I can do this. Like I can beat these guys up. Had zero training, just a 18, 19-year-old kid, right? Thinking I'm tough. I'm like, I can do this. They had another tournament, another fight the following weekend, and I paid my whatever $20 to enter into it. And I joined the tournament, and I fought 3 times, and I won 3 fights, and I won the tournament.
Did you really?
Yeah. And it was like,
did you have any
no
prior
experience?
Yeah. No. Well, so my experience was watching this 10-disc King of the Cage DVD set. That I was a Dwayne Ludwig fan and watched this King of the Cage DVD set. And I would in my college dorm room, I would just mimic some of the moves that I saw. Like that was the only experience that I had.
Okay.
And I won this tournament just because I was a young, dumb, athletic kid that didn't want to quit. Now, granted, the talent I was going against wasn't that high, so let's not kid ourselves here. But that's how I got into it. There's another tournament. A month later, I went and fought, knocked the guy out, won the fight. So I started off 4-0, and I was like, I really like this. So then I started training. I kind of did it backwards, right? So I started training mainly mixed martial arts for many, many years. I was an 8-year white belt because I despised jiu-jitsu. I was a striker. I was a ground and pounder. Was not a jiu-jitsu fan until I went to Joe Bays and Nice Guys in Owensboro back in, I don't know, 2011, 2012 or so. And that's when I fell in love with jiu-jitsu, and that just kind of grew from there.
Did you have wrestling? Did you have you didn't wrestle at all, man?
I wish I had.
Dude.
I wish I had.
You've double-legged me more times than I care to remember, into the wall.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's just like, it's wild. Like, so how do you think that was an advantage for you doing MMA first and then getting into jiu-jitsu? What do you think? How do you think that helped you?
So if you guys ever roll with an MMA fighter, it's a different kind of roll, right? They typically like the top game because they don't want to be on their backs getting punched in the face. Typically more aggressive, more explosive, and typically less technical, right? In general, MMA guys are more about the explosiveness and athleticism, and you see less technical.
There's just
grappling.
so much urgency to an MMA fight. Everything has to be done with urgency, with quickness. You don't have that time to set things up methodically.
Yeah. So that helped me out starting off, but really it also kind of hurt me because I always joke that I was a spazzy brown belt, right? I was pretty fast and aggressive my entire career, and it took me 16 years to finally slow down and focus on technique. So the MMA side definitely helped me from like an aggressiveness and from an energy level and sense of urgency. But I do think it kind of held me back on the technique side until I finally just flipped this switch, like calm down. Pulling guards okay, working from your back is okay. And really it was Chewy's speech. It was Chewy's speech. I don't know if you remember this, Chewy, but I was up for my black belt, and I was afraid you were going to give it to me. It was February of 2021. I was afraid you're going to give me this black belt because I did not feel like I deserved it, and I was worried I was going to get it. And thankfully, of course, you didn't give it to me, and you pulled me aside. You said, "Hey, man, you need to work on your bottom game. Like you're almost there, but you need to work on your bottom game." And that was like what lit the fire for me to completely change my mindset of how grappling works and just slow it down and focus on being more technical and focusing on the bottom game. And that's what really changed my entire jiu-jitsu career, was that conversation, 3 years ago.
I remember it. Do you think that it was, because I remember that day pretty well, because in particular, I watched you and Dustin. And I watched you guys, and basically, as long as you guys were on top, you guys were just killing people. But then the minute we put you on the bottom, it was very like you could just tell there wasn't this same I know exactly where I'm going sort of thing that you would expect from someone at a high level. That what you had on top, you were like you knew exactly where you were going. It looked very deliberate, whereas on the bottom it didn't. Do you think that when I was like, hey, go work your bottom game, do you think that simply allowed you mentally to sort of give in to it and say, okay, I'm just going to play this game because now I'm being told to, Whereas maybe before there was still some level of resistance because, you know, again, your first experience with grappling was such that you don't want to go to your back. And a lot of times it's hard to break that initial interaction, right? We have those initial interactions, like, you know, you might have a first, what's the word? A first interaction with a particular person, and you might sort of make a judgment on that person. And then even though you start having new information come in, it takes a while for you to realize, oh, that person's not such a bad person. Sometimes our first interaction with like
first impression,
yeah, or your first impression with jiu-jitsu, it was like such a thing where you don't go to your back and maybe it stuck with you. Why do you think that you were like so okay with going to the back at that point? Do you think it was just simply that you had the okay to do it, or do you think it was several factors?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously I looked up to you, right? And here's my coach, this guy who's taken me pretty far in my career. I've known for, I think, 7 years at that point, who's like, hey, Jeff, you're right there, but this is what you're missing. And it just connected. I think also it was an ego and arrogance thing, right? Because my style had taken me pretty far. Like I'd gotten to brown belt and I was pretty competitive. I was pretty, I was doing well against other brown belts, other black belts. I felt very comfortable. But I knew all along I was a top guy. And I wasn't that well versed in the bottom, and just the timing of everything, and you saying what you said to me in that very moment, it was like the key that just unlocked the door. And from then on, I stopped being concerned about winning practice, and I was more focused on being a good partner and developing my skill set and listening to my coach. So it really completely transformed my mindset in jiu-jitsu, and I'm very thankful for that.
Well, and then what was interesting was you ran with it, and then it was, you know, like a year later, I remember you were, you know, out and about, or, you know, doing a tournament or something, and you pulled guard on a person and then submitted them from your back. And I think that was like your first time ever pulling guard in a tournament. And it was like, oh man, look at this. Like, you know, I went from being this top player, and then a year later, now I'm pulling guard on someone and I'm submitting them. It's like kind of, you know, you have a new aspect of your game.
Yeah.
What was like the process? So like you're like, all right, I got to develop this new part of my game. What was your process going into it? Like, how did you start to develop? How did you start to play? What did you do initially? So this could go for anybody that's trying to add layers to their game. Like, what did you start to do?
Well, I think anytime you want to add something to your game, you've got to put yourself in the position to be able to use it. So I wanted to work a couple of half guard sweeps, and I had these in my arsenal, but I never really used them because I never let myself go to the back.
Yeah.
But I started intentionally putting myself on bottom. I would just sit guard. I don't have any good guard pulls. I'll just sit guard. I'll just walk up, I'll touch, I'll sit down, and I'll just work from there. Or I'll just let people start on top. And if I would hit that sweep, I would say, all right, let's reset. And I'd go and do it again. And then I'd go and do it again. So I was not only getting those reps in drilling, but also in live rolls. If I hit the sweep, I didn't stay on top and finish from the top. I went back to the bottom and said, let's start again.
Positional drilling, positional sparring. I mean, that's like, I think that seems like a recurrent theme. Chewy, what do you think? For getting better.
I mean, time and position, right? And
100%.
So, and the thing about like, so Jeff, like, there's a video of that I have online, and it basically the title is something like training twice a week is a waste of time, because that's what the guy in the message sent to me. And of course I explained that it's not a waste of time. It just depends on how you use it. You know, a lot of times you can come into training and you can train like 5 days a week and just kind of like not be very mentally involved, and you'll get some progress from it. But you could train less and be very focused on what you're actually doing and get a lot more from that training. And I think that's one of the things, like when I made that video, I remember I was saying I had students that do that. And Jeff was one of the guys that was thinking about it, where, you know, he comes into the gym, he actually has something he's working on, right? A lot of people can come into the gym and like, I'm just here, opposed to like, I'm trying to work on this technique. I'm trying to ham sandwich everyone, right? Or whatever the technique is. It's really useful to do that. And that's like one of the things where I think, you know, he's continued to progress, even though he's not necessarily training like every single day a week. Because I think a lot of times people have this misconception that you can't make progress in jiu-jitsu if you're not training like a world champion or something like that. You can make plenty of progress for yourself. You might not be that like world champion or whatever, but that's fine. You have other aspects of your life that you're working on, but you can still make progress. And I think one of the things is like situational rolling is nothing more than simply forcing yourself to focus on a particular area and not giving yourself the option to then just go back to whatever else that you would normally like to do. Because what happens is we all like to play the games that we're good at. And so you might play the game that, you're a little weaker at. And then all of a sudden, if you're just doing a full roll, you can easily revert back to, all right, I'm going back to whatever I feel comfortable with. Opposed to if we just do the situational, we kind of force ourselves into that little space and get some time and some quality time in that position. And, if you really think about it, if a person's playing a song, right? Like if they're playing like some musical instrument, they're playing the song. If they really suck at this one specific part of the song, would it be better to play the whole song all the way through over and over again? Or would it maybe be advantageous from time to time to say, let's just focus on this one little section of the song and let's get some practice with this, since this is where our hang up is.
Yeah. I think, Jeff, you're actually, I don't know if I've told you this, but you're actually, Did you say something?
I said he's handsome.
Yeah, I did.
Well, thank you.
I love your hair, by the way. Your hair, I'm jealous of it. You were actually like, when you did that and you started playing like off your back and a lot of leg locks and stuff, that actually helped me kind of like, all right, let's start playing. We started playing leg locks too, because then you'd start like, I'm working on this thing, check this out. And I would, everybody loves to win. Like shit, nobody likes to lose. We love to win. It's love, win the roll or, whatever, submit your opponent.
Practice.
Yeah. But I was like, all right, let me start playing legs a little bit more. Cause I was like, I can kind of defend legs, but I want to start like getting in there and attacking. And we start getting in those interchanges whenever we get to train together. And I think that was some inspiration for me to just like start to like add layers to my game as well. Cause I felt like there's certain things I did well, and I enjoy playing off my back because I feel comfortable there. I don't have any kind of wrestling background. So takedowns were kind of a thing. That's something I feel like I still need to work on as well. But you doing that stuff, like you actually adding those elements and learning was a big thing for me to like, all right, cool. Because we get rounds in and we'd start getting in this. You put me in those situations too. You put me in leg lock, engagements. We'd have to go from there. So it was good, helpful for me too.
One thing I love about rolling with you though is you are willing to explore that weakness of yours, right? You recognize that legs were missing, that the takedowns were missing, but you weren't afraid to engage in that with me. And I love that.
Yeah.
You didn't disengage and go back to your style. You're like, you know what? We're in this leg entanglement. Instead of trying to escape and run away, you try to fire right back.
Yeah.
And you have progressed significantly.
Didn't turn out well for me though.
Not initially, but now, now, man, you're tough.
I'll play. Yeah. And one thing that I did, like if we were doing takedowns and stuff, I would make sure I was like, I'm not sitting guard. I'm gonna at least go for the takedown if I get taken down, whatever. And just like one thing, you got to put yourself, like you said, you got to put yourself in this situation and just kind of just do the damn thing. Cause I think that's the only way you get better and not, not care. I mean, obviously I don't like getting submitted, but not really give a shit that it's going to happen. Cause it will. And that's the only way you get better. I think those mistakes are huge for getting better. So, Chewy, what was like, did you see something in Jeff that like you decide like, hey, was it like that moment that he did the like the tournament and showed you the video that you're like, he's ready for his black belt, or is there something you saw?
Well, I mean, his game was already good. I mean, I could have promoted him to black belt. It's not like he couldn't beat black belts, because he could. Right. He did it all the time. The issue is that, from a guy who was going to be teaching and people are going to look up to, that whole thing, like you kind of want them to have a well-rounded game to some degree. And all he lacked was literally, the only thing that he lacked was some sort of like it's like when you roll with someone or you watch them roll, you get to the point where if you're like high enough level, you can look at them and it's almost like someone simply just, they know where they're going. It's like they have the GPS coordinates set out. They're making the right turns. There's no hesitation to stuff. They know exactly where they're going. They know what they're doing. And so there's this deliberateness to it. There's no hesitation to it. Whereas when someone's kind of unsure of a part of their game, it's almost like a person like maybe telling you something and then we're going, they do a lot of that. They're not very sure what they're getting ready to tell you. And it's like that with the rolling. They're using a position, they're using a technique, but they're not really quite so sure about it all. There's not a deliberateness. There's not I'm doing this to this to this to this to this kind of thing. And so that was the only thing he really lacked. And I know we did a couple of private lessons over the course of that year together and kind of just looked at some stuff in your game. He would go back and like do some stuff and test it and then kind of work from there. And then, it worked from there. And he just, I forgot the exact date, but I know that I rolled with him. And then I also I had rolled with him, and I also had watched him roll in class and all that other stuff. And you saw that I was like, okay, he now has a bottom game to match his top game, where he knows exactly what he's doing. He has a very deliberateness of purpose. And again, it's, you know, as you become a black belt, you just continuously flesh things out. But at least I have a situation where if this guy was to go compete, or if he rolls with another black belt, he's not going to be completely, you know, I don't know what to do. And so really that was all what it really came down to, was just plugging that hole, and then everything else was already in place.
Yeah. What, Jeff, what was like, you know, when you're working on techniques and you're competing, you usually want to take your A game into competition. What was like your process of like, I've been working on this game, I want to go ahead and like at a, you know, any competition, brown, black belt, it's going to be pretty decent high level. Like, what was the point where you're like, I'm going to set guard here, I'm going to work on these techniques? Like, what was going through your head?
I told Chewy I was going to do it, and I had to do it. That's why I sat guard in that tournament. So I forgot when the conversation took place, but it was late 2021. I just got my black belt in July, and there's a tournament coming up. It was BJJ Fanatics tournament in January 2022, and I told Chewy, I was like, hey man, like I feel comfortable. I'm gonna pull guard in this match, and I really didn't have any. I don't have a guard pull. I don't like pull you in my guard. I literally just sit guard, and I do the seated guard and the butt scoot, and I enjoy it. I made fun of those people for probably 18 years. And now that's what I'm a butt scooter. But I told you I was going to do it, and I had to follow through, and I did. I sat guard on somebody, ended up sweeping him, got on top, passed his guard, and finished with the north-south choke. So I still finished from the top, I guess, but at least I started from the bottom, and that was a confidence thing, because I said I was going to do it. I did it. I swept them. I was like, man, this actually works.
Yeah.
I was so proud. I told Chewy afterwards. I think Chewy missed that match. He missed the first of
I got there matches. I got there just a little bit after.
Yep. And I showed him the video. I was like, hey man, I just pulled guard. Check this out.
Awesome.
Well, and that's cool, because like when you do something like that in a competition, when you're working something new, or there's something really satisfying about taking something that you've been working on that's not part of your usual game and hitting into competition. Or, you know, anytime you work on like a technique for a while, or a position or whatever it might be, and then you go and use it in a competition, there's something rewarding about that. Like when I've competed, you know, plenty of times or whatever, and the tournaments that I usually get the most excited about, like when I'm done with them, and the ones that I kind of like, I'm really happy about that performance, are the ones where I had drilled a technique or a position leading up to it, and I was able to execute it like perfectly, or execute the game plan perfectly in competition. It feels good. It's like you've got this new area of your game you've worked on, and boom, you brought it out against someone else under a highly stressful situation. That's just a satisfying feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. But what about like competition wise? There's something like, do you feel, we'll talk about the Jiu-Jitsu Open in a second. Like, do you feel like, what's the importance of competition to you? Do you feel like that was something that really elevated your game as well? Because you've kind of competed pretty regularly through all the belts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a confidence boost when, you know, when you compete, or when you roll with your partners every day, the same people, you see the similar styles, and you you know, sometimes you get beat up, sometimes you win. But when you roll with the same people, you get familiar with each other. Whenever you go to a competition and you go against other gyms and other people and other styles, it's a confidence boost to see how well your stuff works against them. And I attribute that a lot to, of course, Chewy and the culture in the gym that he's built, because everybody's tough at Derby City, right? There are no easy rolls. And then if we go to competitions, we're like, man, you know, this stuff works really well against these other gyms that have different skill sets. But it's also, I enjoy competing. I enjoy testing myself. I enjoy pushing myself to do something bigger and better and harder. And the competition is the ultimate test of that, right? Is what you've been doing, does it live up to where you're trying to get to? And you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you learn from each one, and you think about, how can I fix that for next time? Then you go to your next tournament, your next competition, and you make that adjustment, and you just see the results. And I just like to constantly improve and constantly to test myself.
Do you get nerves still with competing, or are you like, what is that? For me, that's a big thing. Yeah. Like, I don't care to compete. Like, I get nerves. I care about the nerves is what bothers me. Honestly, that's like my biggest hang up. And I've like always tried to, I think one of the ways is just to compete regularly. But I mean, is there something that you do, or do you still get nerves?
I did until that tournament 2 years ago where I pulled guard for the first time. I used to get really bad nerves, man, especially when I was fighting. I'd be in the back warming up for a fight. I remember that whenever I fought for you, Chewy, back in 2014, we were in the back and getting ready to go. And I just had these thoughts in my head, like, I wish something would happen that this fight would be canceled right now. Like I wish that power would go out. I wish something catastrophic would happen that I don't have to follow through with this fight. Like I used to get really bad nerves. But that tournament 2 years ago, what made me get over it was the scheduling was a little off. So I didn't know I was up next, and I wasn't warming up. I still had my sweats on. Like I hadn't done any sort of warm up drills, exercises. And all of a sudden they say, "Hey, Jeff, you're up." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So I had no time to even think about it. So I just ripped my pants off, had my fight shorts on, and I went out there, and I just executed. Ever since that tournament, anytime I compete, I really don't put a whole lot of time into thinking about what's my opponent going to do? When am I up? Let me go get some reps in before we go. I just relax and go with the flow, because that tournament proved that I was comfortable just dropping in on a moment's notice, doing my thing and enjoying the day. And now I will often compete in tournaments that I host. So I'll be running a tournament, and I'll be up next, but I can't prepare for my match because I'm still trying to run this tournament. So I'll be running a tournament. I may be reffing a tournament. I may be filling in for somebody, and then, hey, it's your turn. Bam, I go and compete. Then I go back right back to running a tournament. And that level of comfort and just being busy and not thinking about it. We were actually talking about that earlier, right? Yeah. Like maybe if you're reffing your matches, you're not sitting there worried about what's coming up because your mind's occupied. I feel I perform better like that because I'm not focused on the what ifs and
like the watching the matches. Cause that kind of like that energy, like Chew, you've talked about it too, you know, just sitting there watching matches, like you feel that energy in the building and like in the matches, the intensity, it kind of almost like wears you out.
Yeah.
It can
mentally wears you out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just get tired because you're like, you feel your own heart rate. Like, shit, my heart's going, man. Why is it going right now?
Yeah, you start feeling that. You start watching a match, and you start feeling that thump in your chest.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you might feel your body clench up or be very tense. You know, I used to do that even, gosh, I would do that even like if I had an MMA fight, it'd be like a week or two, you know, before the fight. And all of a sudden I'm like gripping the steering wheel and like I'm driving, but like my head in my mind, I'm like in the fight somewhere. And then when I get to the destination, all of a sudden I realize my shoulders are all hunched up and tight. My grips are tight. And I'm like, whoa, I need to relax a little bit. And so you definitely have like a really powerful.
I feel tense as we're talking about it. Like it's tensing me up. I was like,
doing it to me too. Actually,
I was like, just like, oh, my heart's starting to go. Like just think about the tournament and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but like, I started to look at those feelings as a good thing though. Like I've talked about this before. Like, you know, I remember I used to hate the feelings, and then as I got older, like I kind of like them. You know, it's like when you get ready to fight, because it's like it's just a feeling, right? And your perception can shade it to be a bad or a good thing. You know, and all the crazy stuff goes in our head that like, oh man, because I know exactly what Jeff's talking about. Like sometimes I'm like, man, I just wish I wish I could just press a fast forward button, like a videotape or something, and just be past this point. And I hope I hope it goes well, you know. But then when I started sort of viewing it as kind of a good thing, it's like the feelings are coming up. No, this is a good feeling because these feelings make me a little bit more sharp. They, you know, they make me stronger. I typically compete better than I roll in the gym. So like, okay, cool. This is a good thing. And when I started viewing them that way, I still get like on edge, but it's not like a negative thing. I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm ready to go. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit these techniques on them and that sort of thing. And so I've been able to sort of embrace them, so to speak.
Yeah. Use them to your advantage a little bit. Yeah. So, Jeff, what about like, and Chewy for you as well, you guys started running the Jiu-Jitsu Open. We're going to have the second ever Jiu-Jitsu Open coming up, and that's going to be in Louisville on the February 24th.
February 24th.
Yep.
Yes.
24th. It's a Saturday. And then Sunday is going to be a seminar, Chewy, right? Where's that going to be at, by the way?
At the gym.
At the gym. Okay.
It'll be at the gym. This one will be at the gym. Yeah. So
gotcha.
For those of you guys that are coming to the Jiu-Jitsu Open, you compete. The competition will be at the venue, the Crown Plaza down by the airport. And then the next day we'll have the seminar at the gym where you guys can come train with me and work with me with some techniques and some training. So how did this whole idea come? Jeff, you had kind of worked with a certain company. You kind of get into that a little bit, but how did this idea for the Jiu-Jitsu Open come about? Like what was your like desire to put a competition together?
So it really was Chewy's idea. I started working with New Way Combat a couple of years. Actually, after that competition 2 years ago, we've been talking about, that was one of their tournaments. They had a partnership with another company and started working with them after that for a couple of years. And then last summer, Chewy approached me. He's like, hey man, he's like, I really want to do a tournament. You know, would you be interested in helping me make it happen? Like, yeah, absolutely. So he asked Erica and I to help bring this tournament to life. So it was really his brainchild, his idea, his skill set, or his rule set. You know, the sub only, the get down rule, all of that was his. And we found out, so that's when we figured out the Madison bracketing, right? Because he knew he didn't want to have weight classes. He knew he wanted to have this certain method of grouping people up, but we didn't really know a name for it. So we started like doing some research, and that's where I figured out this is a real thing. And we put some life to it. But really it was all him. And we started talking about that tournament, started putting all the pieces together. And I had ran some for New Way Combat, but never put one together from like the ground up, because they already had a program, right? So with this one, we had to put it together from the ground up. We had to think of everything, every tiny what if, every piece of equipment that's needed, every rule set. We had to build the websites for it. It was a really cool experience. And I don't know if Chewy had any idea how successful it would be, but man, that was a good tournament.
Yeah, it was at the gym.
That was at the gym. Yeah. That was at the gym, and you know, not the most ideal space.
Hell no.
But man, that was a good tournament. We went really well. People had a blast. It was hot. It was so hot. It was like the hottest day of the summer, one of the hottest
day of the summer. And that air conditioning unit was not working. Yeah. Like we just got that replaced the other day. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And then these bad boys, you could have won one of these if you can see that.
For you probably can't. For any of you guys,
this lapel pin, you probably can't.
We'll can't. It's so small.
Zoom in. But yeah, these bad boys. But like Chewy, let's, besides the awesome medals, which were great, I love these things. What was like? Tell me, your and Jeff, kind of your collaboration. What was the idea essentially of the rule set? Why did you choose it? And what do you think makes that your tournament really like a very beneficial tournament to attend?
Well, let's go back a little bit. So first off, like that tournament that Jeff started, like his relationship with the company New Way, the tournament that was in Louisville, like he's being very nice. Him and his wife essentially just started, like, I think it was Erica. She just starts running the tournament in the middle of it.
Yeah,
like
she did, like she does.
We get there and it's a mess. Nobody really knows what's going on. And his wife just says, "Here, get out of the way. I'll take over." You know, because that's who she is. Like, you know, it's like her power. She just does a thing. And she's like, "Get out of the way. Let me do this stuff." And then, you know, they developed that relationship and they started running tournaments with him. And I have had this idea for a tournament. Like, it's just, you know, it's one of those ideas. I'm like, it would be fun to run a round robin, like no hardcore weight classes, because again, what happens, like there's big complaints that people have at competitions. Number one is at jiu-jitsu competitions, most of the time they're single elimination. So what do? You go to your first match, you lose. Oh man, you're done for the day. Thank you. Take your money. You know, it's like going to the carnival game. You know, you try to hit the ball and then you go home, you just paid $5 and you know, whatever. And then on top of that, sometimes you go to these small regional tournaments and you may not have anybody in your division because, you know, like there's a weight class and, you know, 10 pounds or whatever, and there's just nobody in your weight class. But how often do we roll with people that are just outside of those weight classes in our gym? All the time. And so it was like the big thing that I really wanted competitors to get out of this one was to obviously address those problems for people so they could compete and get more competition experience in. Mm-hmm. But also to help them learn the feeling of being able to let their game go wide open. So what happens a lot of times is when we put too much pressure on ourselves to win and we haven't really tapped into the feeling of being able to turn our brain off a little bit and just go, we can put that pressure on and we end up going into the competition and we freeze up, we don't do as well, that kind of thing. But like Jeff talked about before, there is a feeling associated with you being at your best. And now it's a little different for everyone, but there's a feeling that you will have when you're like, whoa, I just experienced a different side of myself. And that's what it felt like. Not talking about it, not head stuff, right? Because head stuff, talking about it's basically BS. It's like you went and felt it yourself because some things can't be put into words. You have to experience them. And so my idea was, well, what if we gave people a competition where, look, you compete, you're going to have another match after this. So even if you go out there and go after the kill, if you lose, it's fine. You're going to get another match. Also, it's sub only. So there's no points. We're looking for people that want to try to finish this thing. And so we're looking for people that want to be gamers and they want to go after the win. And so the idea was to put people in a situation where they could literally focus on as few variables as possible. We don't have a weight class. There are no points. And you are going to win. You're going to get another match regardless of whether or not you win or lose. So this way, you could turn your damn brain off and just go. And then my hope is that people can then use that feeling to then compete in that same manner when they go compete at another tournament somewere else, right? So they like, man, like going to that tournament help unlock that feeling in me that we've all experienced at some level, where you're able to like compete at your best, where you get off the mat and you're like, wow, I look better there than I do in the gym. And it was because I didn't care. I didn't care whether I was just focused on going after someone, opposed to scoring the 2 points and sitting there and doing nothing, opposed to, well, what happens if I lose and I don't make it up to the podium, or I don't get to do another match? You're just going. And so that was my thought process with it. I wanted to create a tournament to help facilitate that feeling in people so they could experience that and then take that on with them, you know, wherever they might go. And then I had that idea in my mind for a while. And, you know, Jeff, and then we're running the tournament, and Jeff, we were kind of talking about it one day, and, you know, he's like, well, you know, let us help you. Let me and Erica help you do it, you know, and that's perfect because, you know, if I had tried to run the tournament on my own, it would have been terrible. It just would have been awful. First off, it wouldn't have been as successful as it was, but also too, like, as hot as it was, like Erica had rented these big giant industrial fans that were spewing out like air and keeping us at least relatively cool during most of the day. There wouldn't have been any of that. Everybody just would have been dying, and you know, it would have been terrible, you know. And so you know, they bring a certain level of like, because like Jeff, he's you know, he helps run I don't know what your job title technically is with the amusement park, but he's managing hundreds of people. Right. So he's got a much better idea of like management. And Erica had like a very good, clear idea of like for spectators. Cause I'm thinking all about the competitors. I want this warm-up mat. I want this and that. And she's like, well, where are people going to sit? I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. Like, I just want to get this tournament going. And she's like, we're going to do this. Here's how we're going to have the flow. And so they bring those aspects to it. And I think that's what made it good. It made it a reasonable tournament, even in those hot conditions that we had. Everybody, for the most part, I think almost all of the feedback that I got was very positive. And so I'm excited about this next one, where we're going to have a bigger venue. The tournament's already bigger than the one we did back in July of 2023, but we've got a bigger venue. We've got more resources pushed into it. And I think it's exciting. So it's going to be exciting to see what that's going to look like here in February.
Yeah, and then there's no draws as well. Like even though there's no submission, you have the referee. The referee can kind of pick, you know, the winner based on, you know, what are some of the guidelines? Like maybe if there is like a, you know, nobody scores a submission, what happens? How do you kind of figure out who the winner would be?
Yeah, so there's a ref decision, and I'll let Chewy elaborate, but the focus is people being aggressive and going for the submissions. So that's going to be one of the number one decision makers, or the number one influencer on that ref when he's making that decision, is who's actually going for the kill. And Chewy, I know this is kind of your concept. You want to elaborate some more?
Yeah, I want to see people go for it. You know, I want to see people trying to push it. You know, we've kept the round times relatively short. Like there's no long rounds.
No
right?
10-minute rounds.
What are they?
7 minutes for black belts, I think purple, brown, and black, and expert, advanced, and 6 for intermediate blue, and 5 for white and beginner.
Yeah, so like anybody, any decent person that's in shape, you can go that long. And so there's like any black belt who's in decent shape, they can go for 7 minutes. And so again, you know, to me, like what's the worst part about jiu-jitsu sometimes is like you watch these, like I love ADCC, by the way. But like the ACC championships, it's like 10 and 20-minute matches. And what happens? They basically club each other for the first 5, 10, and then they'll start to work afterwards when the points start. You watch an EBI round, right? What do? For the first 10 minutes during the regulation round, they don't really do much of anything. And then in the EBI overtime rounds, that's when they go to action. It's like, look, let's make the round time. It's like you think of wrestling in from the Olympics into high school. In high school, it's 6 minutes, right? 6 minutes. When you get to the Olympics, they don't it's not an 18-minute round. It's basically the same time. You just go faster, right? So the idea is that like we can keep the rounds short, and there is no points. You know, there's technically no points, right? They're kind of invisible points. But essentially, we're looking for people who are, you know, going after aggression and, you know, going for the finishes is number one, but also positional control. You know, if the one guy had like 2 submission attempts, but the rest of the round, you're just getting smothered in the bottom of mount while this guy just brutalizes you, well, then of course that person's going to win. But again, we've all had those rounds in a competition where maybe not everybody's had this, but I've had this plenty of times where, you know, if you had just got done rolling with the person in the gym, you'd be like, I totally like got the better of that exchange. But because of the way the points work, well, they got you with this particular thing, so they beat you by 1 point, or they beat you with an advantage or whatever. You know, and again, it always kind of sucks because you're like, oh, I felt like I did more. So we wanted to make it to where you're rewarded for aggression, you're rewarded for going for the finish, and pushing the pace on someone. So again, that's the idea. So again, aggression, positional control, those are the biggies. That's what we're looking for over everything else.
And then there's like the get down rule. What's that? Like specifically, if people don't know.
So the get down rule is if after 2 minutes, no one has landed a takedown or a guard pull, if the match is still on its feet after 2 minutes, then the ref will decide who is basically controlling that stand-up battle, and will give them the choice of being on top or on bottom on the ground. So the ref will put them on the ground and then start the match again.
So just kind of promote, like you said, like it's not ADCC where they're clubbing each other and standing for 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever.
Right.
They get
right. Because like, what do you want to see? Right? Do you want to see people like, again, in 2 minutes, someone should have a takedown, or at least should have almost got something, right? Within 2 minutes, you should have something going on. And if not, it's like, okay, well then, like, it's like wrestling. And wrestling, you have a 2 minute period, and then they flip a coin and say, all right, you're up, you're down, whatever, and you choose. So it was kind of like that whole thing, almost like a quasi period system where say, okay, listen, if you're not getting anything going, no problem. We're going to force you down there. And so to me, that gives the incentive for the wrestler types. If they don't want to be on their back, well, they need to be aggressive, because if that other guy just kind of pushes them around a little bit, then they're going to be able to put you on your back when that 2 minute period comes up. You know, and so again, it's a way to just make sure that we actually get to do jiu-jitsu, rather than simply just shoving each other and, you know, basically not really going. Because again, I don't mind. I love takedowns. I come from a wrestling background. I still love takedowns. Love it. But I don't like seeing people not actually go for takedowns, but just kind of look busy. So again, it's one of those things where I'd like to encourage people to get into the action, really get them to get after it and go after each other.
Yeah. Jeff, what about like, what's maybe, and for you, Chewy, as well, like what's like an unforeseen, what was like a challenge that you maybe didn't anticipate that popped up that you have to kind of solve with the tournament?
I would say, thinking about the last Jiu-Jitsu Open, the heat was definitely one of the big things. Chewy mentioned Erica. So my wife, she's my right hand in this whole thing. We do all these tournaments together, and we have very different roles. And I think Chewy really nailed it earlier. She thinks about the guest experience. She thinks about the spectator. She thinks about flow and making sure that people that are there to support their kids or their family, their friends, have a good experience. And that's where she thought of those fans. They're these giant industrial sized misting fans. And the day before the tournament, we were calling, I think it was Sunbelt Rentals or whatever. And we went and picked them up. And it was just like a last minute, like, we've got to figure something out so people don't pass out at our tournament. Yeah. But there's always something that comes up last minute that you didn't think about. And just having a good team, you know, having Erica there to help be that right hand to help solve these issues. Because no matter what, something's going to happen. It's how do we deal with it once it happens? Yeah. And it's just thinking through it, having the right people to make it happen.
I mean, that's for anything. Like even in a match, you know, you may go for a takedown slip or something. Somebody gets on your back, you know, how do you figure it out? Like, you got to do it on the fly, I think. Yeah. You know, Chewy, what about for you? Is there anything like from being like kind of a different role, kind of like a host / ambassador of this tournament? What was like something for you that maybe was that you enjoyed or was unanticipated?
I mean, I enjoyed the tournament. I thought the tournament was a lot of fun. Yeah. I was surprised. Like, this is a good thing, but completely unexpected. There were people that had driven from as far as like 9 hours away to compete. You know, they drove that morning, got there to compete, you know, and then they were driving back home, and they came to compete. And because it was like, they had seen the videos, like, I like Chewy, I'm going to go compete this tournament. There was one big fella, Joe, who came up and he had his very first tournament with us. I think he was from Detroit, drove all the way down. You know, he's like, I'm going to go compete at Chewy's tournament. And like his first tournament, he won one, lost one, and he had a good experience. As far as the unexpected, like, negative side, the heat was brutal. Like, that was the thing that made me the most nervous, because what had happened was right around the time that competition was gearing up, we had realized that our heating and air unit, the HVAC system, was going out. And so you could crank it on and it would like shovel air through the building, but it's not cooling it off. And then it just so happened that at that time we were having like the hottest days of the year. I mean, it was brutally hot, especially the thing about like the heat in Kentucky. for any of you guys that aren't around, is we have a lot of humidity, you know, because you can go to like somewhere like out in Nevada or something and it's hot, but it's that dry heat and it's a little different. It doesn't feel as bad, but you go here and it's like it was like 100 degrees in like the South and in like the near South. It's so muggy and you just can't get dry because there's so much more. Like if you think about the way that like sweat works, you know, the water beads up to the surface and then the air pulls it away and then the heat evaporates, or the heat comes off as the water evaporates off your skin to cool you. Well, when there's so much moisture in the air, the sweat can't evaporate. There's too much moisture. So you just turn bright red and you sit there and just bake in it. It's awful. And so that was my biggest worry. I remember like kind of having a little bit of a pit in my stomach about it because I'm thinking, man, you know, this tournament ended up being bigger than I was expecting. And then you think about all the spectators, it's going to be boiling hot in here. And it was, but like I said, for the most part, except for like a couple of hours were in like peak time with the tournament, it was very reasonable. And you know, a big part of it was those big giant fans blowing everything out. We had every fan that we could find around in the place. We had the big giant fans blowing misty air in there, and it ended up working out all right.
That's cool. Did y'all learn anything from it? Like, what do you think will be an improvement? I mean, besides the venue being bigger and more space, is there anything like that you guys would do different?
You know, that tournament went so well. Like I remember how we were on cloud 9 afterwards. But even with that being said, there were plenty of things behind the scenes that were like, man, I wish we'd thought about this. Wish we'd done that. There are some bracketing things that behind the scenes that I've learned to do. Like that was the first time we'd ever done the Madison bracketing like that, where you weigh in the morning of, you plug their numbers in, you do the sorting and the filtering and the grouping. So the bracketing took me longer than I had planned just because I hadn't done it like that before. So I learned some ways to do that better for the next time. So it'll be, you know, problem solved going forward. But I would say that was the biggest thing, was the length of time it took me to get the bracketing ready.
Yeah. Interesting. I enjoyed, you know, Chew, we did like a little interview with some of the winners and stuff. That was a good time. I really enjoyed doing that, walking around. You put like this microphone, you know, like this interview mic in front of Chewy, and just magic happens. It's just, and people act super silly. So that was a good time. We did do like sit down with some of the guys that won the absolute black belt. And then we just talked to some people it was just good. All the interactions were so great because like everybody was just smiling, you know, win or lose, everybody had a good experience. Everybody got some matches in, regardless if you win or lose. I think, you know, obviously you don't want to lose, but even you get some experience. If you're a white or a blue belt and you go in there and you're getting like, probably in my opinion, you know, like Chewy was talking about, you may go to a tournament and get 1-2 matches. You're getting like 2-3 tournaments worth of matches in. And I think it's just, I think bang for your buck wise, I think it really, if you're just looking to get experience, you know, in a short amount of time, you know, for me personally, like having kids, I can't go every Saturday to compete. It's like, if I do it, I got to make it count. So I think, and also getting a match in and kind of like, you know, all right, I got that out of the way. Let's go ahead and try play the game now. And I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah. If you do gi and no gi, you'll very likely get 8 matches.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And then if you add an absolute after that, I mean, you can get 10, 11, 12 matches in one day, which is an insane amount.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's multiple tournaments worth.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's, you know, pricing, right? It's a pretty cost-effective tournament. So you go to an expensive tournament, you pay $120, you get one and done, and you go home. You get such a big bang for your buck. And you mentioned the smiles on the people's faces that you saw. People went 0-4 and were still smiling because they had a good time. Yeah. It was just such a cool experience.
Yeah. And I think like when black belts are free, is that correct?
Black belts are free.
So, you know, if you're a black belt, get out there and do it. Like, I think, and can anybody do the absolute, as far as like, how's the absolute bracketing work exactly?
So the way we're doing the absolute, we're only doing a no-gi absolute, but gi and no-gi qualifiers can enter it. So you got to place top 3. So when you place top 3 in your gi division or your no-gi division, you can enter into the no-gi absolute. And we're giving out cash prizes. So winners of the absolute division get $100. White belts, black belts, doesn't matter. Every single, so we've got beginner, intermediate, advanced, and expert absolute divisions. All of those winners will get $100. And if you are in the absolute, it means you already placed top 3. And another one, you win that, you get a championship belt. So we're giving out belts. We're giving out these much larger medals. If you can see the comparison from last year to this year.
When Jeff was talking about like, or when Eugene asked about like things that maybe you would do differently or things you learned, I'm like, I learned about maybe.
This is a lesson learned.
I'm going to make hold on. It's going to be really loud. I still
think my medals are dope. Look at that medal.
They're cool, man. But like, look, like this actually is like a medal right here.
These are pretty nice. These
Here's the
are
deal,
nice.
guys. When you have to get bigger and stuff like that, all you're really doing is you're really screaming like you're compensating for something.
Yeah, that's right. So if you want one of those small medals, just find Chewy after you win. He'll get you. I'm sure you got a few left. He was mad. I went searching for one. I found one at the gym.
I think this may be the last one in existence.
Really?
I told Chewy I'm going to preserve this for all time.
Let's put it here. Let's leave it here.
We will forever.
There's a box with a few of them somewhere in the back, I think.
I couldn't find it. Jeff had me scrounging.
I think they're in the back. I think like with all the stuff from the competition.
Like these are nice, man. These are like
these are legit.
Yeah, I love these.
These are pretty cool.
So we'll have to keep a couple of it here. I'm gonna try to bring one home, maybe. I'm gonna try to bring one in here and just show it off. But yeah, these are awesome. I just think you guys did a great job with it, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me to referee. Like I wasn't even supposed to, but I kind of hopped in there and helped out, and I was sweating like crazy. But it was so cool to just watch. Like I was doing the white belts, and they were getting after it, man. It was so much fun to watch. But I think it was just a great tournament, well run, and it was cool to see so many of like the teammates as well kind of get out there and compete and get after it too. So I think it's just a good opportunity for anybody. So jump on, because there's not a lot of time, about a week left to get into it, but it was good. It was awesome. I think it'll be even better having a bigger venue and stuff.
Yeah, we're doing it at the Crown Plaza this time in their grand ballroom. They just renovated this grand ballroom. It just opened like 2 or 3 months ago, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's going to be such a cool venue. Very professional space, a lot more mats this time. I think their air conditioning will probably work.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll need misting fans again.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great venue.
And Chewy, so the day after the tournament, if people are like in town or staying for the weekend, like you're doing a seminar, what is that kind of, and you're right now, Jeff is in your seat because you're getting ready to do a seminar. What can people expect from a Chewy seminar? And I got like a whole week of seminar stuff because we went to, Costa Rica with you. But what's the game you're starting to work on, and what are you trying to show now?
Well, if you come to one of my seminars, then you can expect that you're not going to learn anything flashy. So we'll say it like that first, right? I always say that, because I'm not a bright, shiny object kind of guy when it comes to jiu-jitsu. I'm like the guy that I like the simplistic games. I think a lot of times people get drawn in by a lot of like, ooh, this looks cool kind of thing. And they can sometimes forget that there's a lot of value in the very simplistic fundamental stuff. It's not necessarily about the techniques that make it. It's about the details and the way that you use them. This is why you can have for me, like, I feel like stuff in jiu-jitsu, sometimes it gets so old that it becomes new again. Yeah. It's almost like someone hanging on to their old bell bottoms or something, and they wear them again, and it's back in style or something like that. Like I remember watching, I've watched several guys, like for instance, basic stack passing and double under passing. People like maybe want like some crazy game or something like that. But when you look at like, say, even a lot of jiu-jitsu at the highest level, a lot of it is not necessarily stack passing, but a lot of pressure passing. Yes, you can do all the cutting and everything else and the standing passing and the big movements and scrambling. But when you look at a lot of guys, there's a lot of incredibly effective guard passers, and their game is low in pressure, especially no-gi, right? As an example. So what I'm really working on is basically with my own game is how to slow things down to the point where I can outwork someone with position and with good control, and I can basically drown them without having to exhaust myself. And the reason for this is because as I'm getting older, I'm not in the situation where I can just outwork everyone, right? I was talking to one of the guys about this the other day. When I was younger, I could just always outwork everybody. I could just go, you go faster, I'll just go faster with you. And eventually you're going to get tired doing that with me. Whereas now, like, when I'm rolling with, say, guys like Brandon, Reed as an example, like I can't do that with him. And we're getting, guys are getting younger and I'm getting older. And so again, it becomes increasingly hard. Whereas by just pinpointing a few things, like in no-gi, I can slow the action down. I can put the brakes on someone. I don't necessarily need handles from the gi. And I can basically put people into a place where they're at a positional disadvantage. They're having to work harder, and I don't have to work as hard. I can take a breather, and at the same time, I'm just slowly working them down, chipping away at them. And that's become, it's like the old man grappling style is really what it is, but it's something that could work for someone who's younger too, if they simply just want to be a little bit more technically dominant rather than relying on attributes. And so that's really what I'm focused on right now. And that's what I plan to teach this year, is the stuff that I'm working through in that space. So I don't have every seminar like lined up. This is what I'm going to go over, but it's going to be some extension of that, right? Learning how to slow our jiu-jitsu down, learning how to control people, learning how to outwork them with position to the point where they're getting exhausted, and you're making them work at a sprinting pace while you're basically working at a jogging pace. And I say it this way because there's been times where when I started implementing this into my game, I'm talking to someone afterwards and they're like exhausted, huffing and puffing. And then I'm looking at my heart rate from looking at my heart rate monitor, and I'm still like, in the 140s, which is, I still got some room to go if I needed it, which is what I want. Is I don't want to have to always just go full red line every time I roll in the mats. And so that's kind of the idea, what people can expect.
Very cool. And Jeff, like switching to you, talking about like training as we've gotten older, like you used to be like super, like, man, your pace was very high all the time. And I think it's kind of slowed down a little bit as well. Do you feel like that's something as you've gotten older, because you're 38 now?
38.
Yeah. So like you and Chew are the same age. I'm 40. Like, have you started to implement that kind of stuff into your game as well to kind of, at least be more effective on the mats?
Yeah, definitely try to slow it down. A big part of why I slowed down was I got hurt.
Yeah.
I got injured. Right. I got this rib injury. I got my black belt in July of 21. And then in August or September, I got a really bad rib injury that lasted like 18 months. And that rib injury forced me to slow down. It forced me to adopt to a different, it forced me to start working my bottom more as well. So that really slowed me down, and was all the injuries, because as we get older, we don't recover as quickly.
Yeah.
Right. We don't heal as much, heal as well. But also, I want to pick on something that Chewy said earlier. He's like, I'm not going to teach anything flashy. I agree. I don't think we do a lot of flashy stuff at Derby City, but I think we do a lot of stuff that other gyms don't see and don't know about, because I love to travel and drop into other gyms, and I'll try a move at another gym and I'll hit it. And they're like, man, what did you just do? Can you show me that? And I sit here, I'm thinking, like, I thought this was normal. I thought everybody did this. I thought everyone knew how to do it this way. So I think we kind of take it for granted that we've got Chewy teaching us all these really cool things that we all use. But they are flashy. They're flashy in a different way to other people. Just these little tweaks, these little different things we do here and there. The giggler, I think, is one that really catches a lot of people off guard. And to us, it's commonplace every day, all day, because we all do it. But you go to other gyms, it may not be quite as common. It's like, man, what is that? How do you, can you show me that?
Because it just, when you get hit with it, you're like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
Look like you did nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a hip shovel, essentially. Yeah.
Right. And I think what you're kind of getting at, and this is the stuff that I geek out about, is like those small adjustments, those small details where
micro adjustments.
It's not the micro adjustments. So you can go be a white belt and submit a purple belt. It's like those details where you take a simple position or simple technique and you show someone something, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes off, and it makes that position or technique like that much more effective. That's the stuff that I geek out about, because to me, that's really the magic of it. Like a brand new technique, whatever, it's fine. But when you're learning how to like say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to like take this double underpass, and you can use it against black belts, and you can use it very easily to take their back now. Or like you said, you're in a knee shield. Hey, here's a beautiful sweep that literally takes almost no effort. It's all timing and finesse. And, you'll hit it on everybody if they're not ready for it, so that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that I like. And those come from those small little details of just understanding, where to put your body, how to respond to certain cues from the person that they're giving you physically. And those details that make you go, I wish I would have thought about that sooner. So
yeah. I want to chat a little bit more about injuries and stuff. So like, you've had, like, you've even mentioned you've been a frequent flyer at like your surgeon's office, because you've kind of got injured quite a bit, and you're dealing with a little bit of injury right now. Like, what have you kind of learned as far as like maybe some mistakes, and what have you learned about dealing with injuries as far as, keeping your body together? I mean, like, what are you doing? Like, what's some mistakes, and maybe what's some advice for people?
I can say that most of my injuries were my fault. Most of my injuries were my fault because, one, I didn't do a proper technique. So I got taken down and I tried to brace my fall instead of doing a break fall, right? Shoulder popped out of place. And that's what started all my shoulder problems. Or someone put me in a submission, and because of ego, I didn't tap. I tore my labrum 3 months ago. So you'd think I'd learned my lesson by now, but purple belt had me in a Kimura about 3 months ago. It wasn't a great technique because my arm was pretty much fully extended, but I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not going to tap this purple belt. It's not even in properly. I'm just going to eat it. And I tore my labrum. But I have gotten a lot better about that. So I think what I teach my students is, if you're the person applying the submission, just catch and release, right? Take care of your buddies, make sure we're not hurting each other. And if you're the person getting submitted, just tap. We're not trying to win practice. And it's funny that I say that because, again, I just had that problem 3 months ago, and look what happened. I didn't take my own advice, and look what happened. But the next thing is, once you get injured, you got to take care of it. And that's one thing that I was really bad about for so long, is I was focused on being the tough guy, right? Oh, I'll be fine. I'll walk it off. And here I am limping around, and hey, anybody want to roll? When I should have just stopped training. And, those extra few rolls probably made my already injured body part worse. Actually, 3 months ago when I tore my labrum, we had promotion day about a week or so later, 3 or 4 days later. And I told myself, you know what, I'm going to go into promotion day. I want to be there to support people, and I'm not going to roll. My wife's like, Jeff, she's like, don't put your gi on. She's like, you better go in normal clothes because you'll roll. I showed up in my gi and I saw all these visiting black belts. I'm like, man, I got to roll. So that probably made it worse, right?
Yeah.
But it could have. And I've had 6 joint surgeries. I've had 6 surgeries, 5 of which were jiu-jitsu or MMA related. And again, most of those are my fault. And so I'm an example when you don't take this advice, like, this is what happens. So here I am, 38 years old. I've had 6 joint surgeries, and I need a 7th because my shoulder's probably not going to get better on its own. So it's stuff that wears on you.
I'll tell you the one thing about having repetitive or chronic shoulder, or any joint chronic surgeries, is like the tissue becomes less repairable. Yeah. Like there's less good tissue to put back together, and you're getting older, right? So the tissue, again, you're not healing as well. And the other thing, people ask me all the time about braces, like, oh, if my knee's jacked up, unstable, I'm going to put a brace on it. That's just not going to work. So like a brace can, maybe you have like a little sore spot on your knee from kneeling. That can kind of, sometimes the cushioning can kind of help. The compression feels kind of good. They keep the joint warm. But more than anything, a brace is like, I see it as a warning sign for your training partner. Like, hey, something's going on with their knee or their elbow, just keep an eye on it. And it's, if you're not one that wants to say things, that they can see that you have a brace on there, and they may kind of give them a little bit of a light bulb moment to, like, just see, is everything all right with your joint? But don't think if you have your knee that's locking, or it's like unstable, popping and moving around because you blew out your ACL, a brace is not going to fix that. So don't, I know there's companies out there that say, oh, I put this brace on, get this brace. As a physical therapist, structurally, you need to strengthen your knee, make sure you have good range of motion, you have good strength in there. That stuff is, there's no way around it. So if you want to get a healthy joint, you have to, obviously get the proper care, but strength train as well.
Well, also too, something I've noticed is, I remember when I was younger, I actually would wear braces every now and then, and I don't wear braces anymore. And it's one of those things where if I start feeling some wonkiness in my knee, I'll go address it. I'll start doing some different mobility, stretching, rehab type exercises and stuff like this. But overall, my knees feel better than they did when I was always trying to rely on a brace. And I don't know, but I feel like it's as if you're giving your body an artificial support. So this way your body doesn't have to develop it itself. I don't know that that's true, but I just feel like that's kind of what's going on. I'm giving my body this artificial support with these braces and these bars and stuff going on, which then would sort of take away from the necessity for my body to build the strength in those ranges of motion that it would have to do otherwise without it.
Yeah. And the type of brace that would provide that stability is not one you can use in jiu-jitsu. It's too big and bulky. It's going to have hinges. It's going to be
like the big, like Stone Cold Steve Austin pro wrestling.
He's got the ACL braces, basically. Those are for ACLs, and those have hinges and good control. Jeff, let me tell you, so people coming back from injury, this is kind of my last question for you. You can be gun shy a little bit. You can be, nervous coming back to get re-injured. Is there anything like that you you've kind of told yourself when you're getting back to training after you've maybe been off the mats for a bit with like a surgery, coming back from surgery?
Don't push it. If it doesn't feel right, if it's not comfortable, don't do it. And I've really been trying to do that this last time with my current injury. After, many, many, many years of not doing it the right way. Just yesterday morning, it was open mat and I had the option to roll or to sit out a match. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to sit this one out.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is don't push it. Don't be afraid to sit back and, don't be afraid to tell your partner that, hey, I'm a little bit sore. Don't do this. I know it's an ego thing because we all want to be tough and we all want to be alphas. But you got to do that if you want your body to last your entire life.
Cool, man. So if people want to still sign up, they have like a week left. This is I
was also going to say real quick, before we go, if you heard us talking about the Jiu-Jitsu Open and you're like, hey, would like to do it. I wanted to give you guys a quick rundown of the events coming up because we've got them coming up this year. We've got one in Memphis in April. We got one in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina in May. May have one in Las Vegas. Still kind of playing around with that. There's one in Branson, Missouri. In August, one in Lansing, Michigan, September, one in Frankenmuth, Michigan, in November, and then we have one in Gatlinburg, Tennessee on December of 2024. So if any of those areas are close by and you'd like to check it out, you can go to jujitsu.newwaycombat.com, or you can simply go on social media, find the Chewjitsu Open, put it in a search engine, and you'll find the website. And you can sign up for one of those events, and you can either come to the tournament, or you can do the seminar, or you can do both. And if you do both, you get a discount for signing up for both of them.
That's awesome. Jeff, you got anything?
No, man. Thank you all for having me on. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode of today's podcast with Jeff and Eugene, who are going to be, if you're watching the video form of it, you'll see that Jeff has now replaced me. So this will no longer be the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. This will be the Jeff and the Jew podcast. Here we are.
Jeff the Jew, baby.
Jeff and the Jew. No longer Chew and the Jew. That for anybody listening, the Chew and the Jew was actually like our sort of.
We thought about it.
We thought about it a little bit. I thought kind of like the fighter and the kid, Chew and the Jew. Like,
yeah, it would have been good. Would have been a good time. But,
maybe get canceled a little bit.
Nah, it's fine.
Right.
Get all upset about what is that? It's fine. It's all good.
Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you got something from listening to the experiences of Jeff. I think there's a lot to be taken from that, especially for any of you guys that are in. Maybe you came from an MMA fighting background. Maybe you're getting a little bit older and you keep running into injuries because you're trying to train too damn hard, or whatever. There's a lot of value in some of the things that he shared that I think is useful to hear from. Or maybe you just have a problem where you don't want to play from your weaker areas because you got an ego, and we all have an ego, but you're letting your ego get the best of you, and you're always using that stuff. So anyway, that said, again, if you guys want to check us out, jujitsu.newwaycombat.com is the website where we're going to be having the events and everything else on there. I'll be sharing stuff on social media. But again, would love to have you guys out there for the competition. If you have any questions, we have a Chewjitsu Open social media page. You can send us a message about it. You can send me a message about it. Be happy to answer questions you might have about it. And then, guys, with that said, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, this episode today was hosted by 2 38-year-olds and a 40. What are you, 41 now, Eugene?
How dare you?
You old
I'm
man.
40, bro.
50.
I'm 40. You were saying this. I heard it. You said, some of us are getting up to close to 40 and some of us are over 40. And I was like, no, we're not. Yeah. We're 40, sir.
Well, so you're over 40. You're 40 plus some days.
40 and some days.
But, if you're ancient like Eugene, then, again, recovery is one of those things that becomes ever more important, right? You're always trying to fight off the inflammation you get from training, fight off the fatigue and the soreness. For me, one of the most important things is mainly diet and rest. If I can get my diet in check, if my rest is good, those are the biggies more than anything else. But then afterwards, then you get supplementation. And there's some great supplements out there that I like, things like magnesium, which I think is really useful. If you get a good form of magnesium when it comes to sleep at night, I think it's very useful. And CBD is one of those other supplements that's in my recovery regimen, stuff I take with me when I'm on trips like I am right now. And it's stuff that I always encourage people to at least try. Everybody's body is different. We respond to supplements different. We respond to medications differently, right? But you can kind of see for yourself. And so I encourage people to try it out, see what you think. The website is charlottesweb.com. They have an array of products, everything from gummies and tinctures, which is like the little eye droppers. I personally use a tincture I take a dose of it each night right before bed, around 30 minutes or so before bed after a hot shower. And then that's my dosage. And again, if you guys want to try it out, you can do so and save 30% using the promo code Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU 30 at charleswebb.com. And you can check them out. Also, check out epicworldbjj.com. My buddy Matt runs the website. They make terrific gear, cool designs, great customer service, great products. I like his stuff. I get my gyms. We should have that for any of my students that are listening. We'll have the new Derby City stuff in here in the should be next week. I've got a tracking number from it on FedEx, and so it should be here soon. And again, I like his stuff enough to get all of my students put into it. And I trust that much. And again, I like to share with other people if you guys want to get some new gi, rash guards, t-shirts, whatever it might be. The website is epicrollbjj.com, and the promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, if you guys would like to support the podcast directly and get access to an exclusive library of content we've created that has everything from warm-up routines and stretching routines specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners, targeting those muscles that we have to deal with, like shoulders, knees, neck, spine, all those things that we have troubled hips. Then Eugene has created a couple of routines that we've taken people through, and those videos are up on that as well. And then we have things like narrated rolls, where I'm basically showing me rolling or someone else rolling, breaking it down, some of my matches, some of the recordings from seminars that I've done, and a whole lot more. And we also have an ad-free version of the podcast in case you don't like listening to these sort of ads that we go through. And again, you can get access to that at patreon.com/the-jiu-jitsu-podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you guys would like to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get access to the 2 free ebooks that I give away. One is on developing your jiu-jitsu game plan. I show a template of what my game plan looked like for a number of years so that you can use that framework to create your own. It's a useful exercise, especially if you have a competition coming up, or if you're just trying to get a read on how your game works right now and maybe how you should, adjust from there. And then the other one is on training and drilling strategies to break through plateaus if you're getting into one of those sticky points where you don't feel like you're making any progress in your game. And along with that, then you'll get my daily email where I send out everything from silly stories that are going on into the gym or seminars, stuff that I have coming up, offers that I have for different products, t-shirts, gis, whatever it might be. And I also share things like books and philosophical ideas that I like that I'm chewing on. So again, if you guys want to get that more, check it out, chewjitsu.net/join. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us here today. Talk to you next time.